Yellow again. My hair's back up, as you can see. There's a bit of wind outside. We've had a bit of rain, and it looks like things are generally starting to simmer down. Better late than never. Wowzer. So, I'm not even sure I'm going to post this. Something I just tend to say, you know. I posted the Titian bits and all that. And I have anyhow been wondering quite a bit as to which personal bits you should post and which you shouldn't really. And I guess that as far for me, how that looks is really if what I do can inspire someone, then I think posting is a good idea. That's what I've done so far. I have made a gazillion videos, as you can see on my channel, and I have shared huge amounts of all sorts of personal experience. And there are things that I find perhaps I do not need to share necessarily, because that's what kind of took me over during my holiday. Also, I wanted to get back in touch with you guys, get back to, have stuff to share, have stuff to show you from my holiday and on. I wanted to share more of that. But there's a couple of buts, and this is going to be a bit more of a reflexive mode video, even though it looks a lot like the other one about Titian just now. I think maybe there will be a point to this anyway, because what I had was 4 videos that I was supposed to be sharing with you guys, okay? One of a trip up a little mountain pass that's quite special. I think that's a pity that I lost that one. Like I said earlier this week, I just accidentally deleted the whole thing because I was trying to get more memory space on my phone. And there's things in there that I could rant about why it is that the Android manufacturers have to stick all sorts of junk in your phone that you're not necessarily going to use, and there's all these different departments, and I just get very confused at some point. And I should not have deleted those videos. But the one about the Little Mountain Pass, the thing there was that it's really a funny type of road going up that way. It's not a big distance, and it's not a tall mountain pass. It is interesting because there's hairpin bends, I think 6 in all of them, and each of the hairpin bends is actually a tunnel. So you're out of the tunnel in the middle bits, like that, and over here, there's all these little hairpin tunnels, and they are one-way street. So there's traffic lights at the top and the bottom of this stretch of mountain, and you have to wait for a green light, and then you can just, go drive up. It was a lot of fun. It was fun filming it. It was also a bit exciting and a bit scary because there were bikers also in the tunnel, and they go a lot slower than you, of course. So you had to shift to first gear, and because Europe, gearboxes, all that kind of thing. So I wouldn't want to know what that. There are probably American models of cars that you couldn't get in there because it's just very tiny and very squeeze. It's a squeeze. So we were okay though. So that was a fun video, and I won't be sharing that because it's gone. The 2 bits that I had about the petroglyphs, afterwards I thought maybe it's actually a good idea that I didn't get to post that, because there's it's a bit of a sensitive spot. It's fragile. And if we get busloads of tourists, not that you will get busloads of tourists from my vlogs, but you never know. If things get promoted in one way or another, you might end up having busloads of tourists. And I wouldn't want that to happen up there, because it's just not, it's just too sensitive. Everything will just, it'll end up falling off the mountain or what have you. It's tricky, and it's a sensitive little spot. I'm sorry. I had to close my doorway over here because they're still working on the roof and there's a bit of wind, and it was just getting a bit noisy and a bit distracting on that side. Okay, so the bit about the prehistoric site, it's really a very small spot, and it's like this row of flat stone surfaces. I've shown you a couple of photographs already. So I was quite a bit obsessed about that, and it's gotten me to think about things in a different way. And that is really what I want to share with you at this time. The fourth video that I did have was just a bit of, tent experience, the way I tend to do my things in my tent with my camping gas and my coffee machine and all that. And it's rather primitive, and it's a lot of fun for us, and it always has been. But then I thought, isn't that really just something that's really quite personal for me? And I have to rethink this, and this is really what I want to sort of share with you today. And I would really be interested also to know how you guys, any of you who really make content often, you will have felt this, right? Won't you? That there are moments where you're sharing stuff nowadays that if you look back 5 or 10 years, you would never have shared. And now it feels good to share some of those really personal things. Yes, but still there are things that you shouldn't, that you should I don't know, hedge in a bit and sort of protect from the outer world. So I was thinking about that. Having said all that, I'm still gonna share a couple more points I have realized as a consequence also of, for example, another good example I think of things to either share or not share. I can record anything I want on my phone and post it on YouTube. I have recorded parts of a spread that I did yesterday because of all the, turmoil and things, wondering about things and questions that I had. Other questions as well. I did a balancing the wheel spread with using actually 3 decks in all. It was really great fun. It was also very illuminating in a couple of respects. I can recommend, I will dig up, I promise, I will dig up the original Balancing the Wheel vlog that I saw and stick the link in the description for you guys to have a look at, because that's really a priceless approach, spread type approach, really, to get this perspective as to as far as for me it went. That's why I used 3 decks. I had 1 deck for my past positions in the different areas of my life. So there's fun and recreation, there's physical environment, there's health, there's finances, family and friends, romance, a couple of more. There's 8 positions in all, and so I had 8 cards from 1 deck for my past positions, and then 8 other cards from another deck for my present day situation. And then I used the Awakened Soul Oracle cards as like a continuation or kind of an inspiration for me to sort of rely on what it is that I can do nowadays to improve on the things that I'm given. Okay, so I hope that makes any kind of sense. But I have not shared the actual story of that spread and the actual cards and the positions and all that, because I felt that it was on the edge of what I'm comfortable sharing. So yeah, kind of, probably not. And you don't need it. You don't. I think you might actually enjoy doing the spread for yourself, hence the linking and all that. And I know how we always love cards and looking at cards and stuff, and there were a couple of really interesting points, and I had to go all the way to the Marielle to reinterpret the 8 of Cups in a way that finally made sense. It made a ton of sense all of a sudden, that kind of thing that you can have. And still, it is like slightly more on the private side of things for me. And from there on out, what I did really is I have started up a new type of journal, and it isn't really anything special to look at. I've got an ordinary dummy book that I use as a normal journal for, you know, the day-to-day business of life. And there's even, you know, price tickets from supermarkets in Italy and that type of junk in there, and tickets to the birthplace house of Titian is in here and all that. That's my ordinary journal. But I found I often have phases where I just want to write about my problems. You know, I have this complexity around a person or a response or a memory or any of it. And I dug out this thing. I bought this at my local around the corner, what do you call that, drugstore, I think. And it's really, I don't know if any of you guys used to have those types of journal books. It's lined. Can you see that? Yes. And it has this suppleness. It's not leather, it's cardboard and plastic. It has a closing thingy with an elastic band, and it also has the ribbon to stick into, you know, as a bookmark, like so. And I used to have something very similar, and they used to sell these. I think they used to have the ribbon as well, not the closing mechanism. They were Chinese back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, early 80s. I used to use those for journals, and if I were to find, maybe I should really shop around on the internet. If I were ever to find that type of journal again, I would scoop them up immediately, because they were this size, I think, maybe a fraction narrower, and they had like this Chinese embroidery type textile on the sides with you know, little lions and dragons and that type of stuff, a bit shiny, not too bright, not so many bright colors. And I think there were also like plastic corners around to protect the corners from falling off, you know, that type of thing. Those were really extraordinarily easy, nice to, you know, it's how it's like. So this is actually a really good replacement for that type of book. It's a bit suppler, it's just easier to fold back and forth. It is actually really, it's a bound book, so it's not glued, it's bound. So that makes that it sticks open, it stays open easier like that. And in this I have started just yesterday really to write down thoughts, you know, just general therapeutic writing. And I have discovered, for example, doing this, that one thing that I did yesterday that I thought was rather cool, I have lived in many places. I have lived in probably about around 20 places or so, all over Europe, different locations, different countries. And I used to not know any members of my family. After a certain period of time, I have sort of lost contact with many of them. And even though they were still around, mainly because I lived in, you know, abroad. And I have found nowadays that I have now different relationships with each of those areas. So there are areas where I have come back, I have returned several times, also because it's really beautiful, it's a beautiful countryside, or there's lots of things to see, what have you. But I have a relationship with those countries and those areas, especially also because I lack family connections. So on my dad's side, I have no connections whatsoever. On my mum's side, I am trying now, you know, very gently to pick up a couple of connections again. And I have done so before. I have now contacted somebody else that I hadn't contacted before. It's a bit, you know, exciting still, and I'm not really tense at it anymore. I have faith. I believe that this will actually turn out to be okay. I have no idea how much real contact will come out of it, and I've certainly realized that I have sort of clung to and attached myself to memories of places because I didn't have people. And that's something that all of a sudden it just kind of opened up in my brain, and I realized this. Okay, so how can I possibly blame myself for my attitudes with respect to this, that, and the other? And then afterwards, when all that is changing because of my Shakti energy work, I find I have nothing to turn to. That has been screwing with me over the past 2 months. The fact that I was really pleased with how my Shakti work was developing. So this is really just another Shakti energy work update, basically all cloaked up in all sorts of other things. But I really had a hard time connecting with the old things. I couldn't connect anymore in the way that I used to. So yes, as Jennifer said, it was a purification, but so that's great, really, and I really see it that way. Except the reason that it caused me so much pain was pain and sadness and anger also at people who really aren't responsible in any way for my situation or my distress. It is because I need, normally, just like everybody else, I need people that love me and that rely on me and that I can rely on, and people that sort of know me and that I know. And there hasn't been any of that ever. So my contacting relatives now doesn't really, I'm not expecting that to fill any of those gaps, okay? I'm not expecting anything except just a bit of kindness would be nice, from both sides of us. And I've actually talked to my cousin again, just over Messenger, and it's fine. It's just good to know that they're there, and that's, for me, that's enough at the moment. And the other part of the story for me is this realization. Basically, also, what I started doing is just finding like an adjective of some sort or some type of a description, short description for the relationship or the way I felt in each of those parts of the world that I used to live in. And I found that they were rather different, and I can go into that forever, which I won't, because I won't bore the pants off you. But there are a couple of things that just come out of writing like this. You sort of give yourself kind of a prompt or homework of some type, and then you start off with that, looking for those descriptions, looking for, okay, this is the way I used to feel over there. So each time I came back there, automatically that feeling came over me again. And whereas if I went to that place, the feeling would be different because blah, blah, and blah, so on. And what I sort of distilled out of that set of descriptions in the end was that I was a real chameleon. And I think I remember Lisa at Supportive Tarot talking about this in some Self-Worth Saturday episode, where she described herself as being a chameleon fairly recently. I mean, in the past month or so, she must have said that at some point. And where, anyhow, it struck me then that it was something that I recognized myself in a lot, and I see it now only more, where I used to just basically do what was expected of me, or what I understood of what was expected of me by whoever, and so I had never any proper solidity, any initiative of my own, zero, And then the other thing that I thought as a consequence of this writing episode here is that I suddenly realized one thing that's also bothered me quite a bit is that I used to be this searcher for truth. I wanted more control in my life. I wanted more control over my emotions. I wanted to not feel so, helpless and hopeless some of the time. You know, there were moments where I had real anxiety, and especially when my mother was still alive, because she had absolute power over me. It was sickening, really. And whatever can be said of that, my mother didn't really want that. She's never wanted any of this. It's been really crazy for both of us. And even if part of her wanted this, it was only because there were other things that, I don't know, I'm not even sure what I'm trying to say here. What I realized is that what I have nowadays, thanks to all the meditating that I've done, you know, the soul retrieval and the Shakti work and all the rest of it, the result that I get out of my life and out of all this interacting with people nowadays, emotionally, is very different from what I was looking for back then. Because if one thing has happened, I have not got any more control now than then. What I have is strength. I have a lot more strength and resilience and vibrancy to my life, which is why I manage being on here, you know. So I found this to be really helpful. It's like having a second journal where it isn't so much about, I don't have to write in this every day. I can just take it along whenever I leave the house, or I may have time, you know, to do any of this type of writing. It isn't so much about keeping track of what I did when and with whom, and, you know, whether I've seen anything cool on YouTube or watching Lord of the Rings. We're watching Lord of the Rings again. That's all that everyday type of stuff just goes in my regular journal. But I found it really useful to have this second book to keep track of also things not really related to cards. There's a few cards here and there that I mention. Not every detail has to go in there. I like to have this second level where you have kind of a view of things, that type of a book. So I don't know, this may have been just a very useless ramble. I will watch it back and see whether it's worth posting at all. And any old how, bless you and thank you for watching as usual, and see you again probably next week. Okay, thank you guys, bye bye for now.